Yeah, when you're ready.
So we tend to use these rubberized gloves quite a lot when we're doing tasks with volunteers. The good thing about these, whereas they won't give you the protection that the leather gloves give you, when using these hand tools, what they do is they give you a lot of grip and they protect your hands. So we tend to use these quite commonly. And then what we tend to do, we've got various range of tools here that you might use on your volunteering event. So things like this, for instance, if you're doing scrub clearance or you're clearing away, we've got a long handled pitchfork here. Things to just make your volunteers aware of is just when you're moving around the site and a bit of safety with regards to that. So what we say to people, if you were carrying something like this, it'll be to keep the sharp end of the pitchfork towards the ground when you're walking around, not be tempted to keep it up there where it's close to eye level, but keeping anything sharp like that angled downwards. And then we've got things like these slashers. If you're doing any clearance of bramble or nettles or anything like that, these slashers are a great tool to use. But what we do advise people is be aware of your distance between the person using the slasher, another user, or even someone doing something else. So we say, as a kind of general rule, we advise people to be twice the length of the actual tool away from each other. So if I'm working here, I'd make sure the next person is at least twice the length of that away from me. And that minimises any risk of coming in contact with each other. And also what I tend to advise people is if we've got an area where people are using a tool like this, I'll try and keep them quite separate from the rest of the group, just in case anyone was to kind of move into that area and there'll be a risk then of any contact. When doing similar work, we also have things like a mattock like this. Now these mattocks are really handy for any kind of digging out, any ditch work, or any roots, small roots, bramble roots. I think they're a really good piece of kit. But one thing to make people aware of is that because you've got a wooden handle and a metal head here, they can become a little bit loose. So it's best to advise people not to be holding this above their head and using it generally from the waist down. So it's using it like this and minimising any risk of that coming loose where it could hurt your hand or even hit you on the head. And with any piece of kit like this which has got a wooden handle, one thing to make people aware of as well is before they use it, just do a quick visual inspection. Just check there's no splits in the handle, anything which might make them be a bit concerned about using it. And if they've got any concerns at all, make sure they know they can put it back and not use that piece of kit. The piece of kit here is called a tree popper. You may or may not use a bit of kit like this, but this is a bit of kit designed for using to remove weed trees. So if you were doing some work on your green space where you're removing, say, self-sown blackthorn, something like that, sycamores, ash, this is a piece of kit which just acts like a lever. You put it around the base of the tree and you can lever that tree out of the ground. With something like this, it's really important not to try and overload it. It can be tempting if you are removing a particularly tricky sapling or larger sapling which has got some pretty deep roots. It's quite tempting to get somebody else on that with you as well, but don't be tempted to do that. This is a single person tool and there is a larger one as well which has more leverage. Both are designed just to be used by one person. So it's really important not to overload something like that. Just a couple of other things we find when we're out with groups is just using spades, using shovels, using forks. With your group you're going to find there's quite a range of skill levels and competence levels, and it's best just to go over a quick run through of even using something as simple as a spade. Advise people not to be tempted to stamp down on a spade when they're using it. That can cause jarring up the leg. Advise people to place their weight on the spade and move the spade over onto it. Little things like that will really make a difference over a day. Same with a fork. We're using a fork. This is a small border fork. You might find people use a slightly larger garden fork as well. Again, it's placing the foot on the fork and just leaning over to get your weight on there. Not jarring down on that, stamping down on that which will jar your leg. Something else to consider as well is just making sure that people are using the right tool for the job as well. A little example of that, just quickly, is the difference between a spade and a shovel. You know, it's making people aware that a spade is for digging and a shovel is for moving stuff. And people will make hard work for themselves if they try and use them for that's not their purpose. When we're out with our volunteers, we always try and carry a sharps box of some description. Quite a lot of parks you won't find anything to worry about at all, but this is a large one that we carry, but you can get the small, bit bigger than a mobile phone size ones as well to carry, and that's really handy. Just if you find any sharps when you're out on site, you can open that up, pop your sharps in, close it up, and that's secure then. One last thing we've got, something like a rake like this. Rakes like this are designed for sort of light use, for raking up a little bit of litter at the end of the day, leaf litter, things like that. They're not designed for moving aggregate or anything like that, or soil. So for that you'd move on to a sturdier rake. So you can see they're quite fine prongs on here. So again, using the right tool for the right job is really important, and that's something you can go through with your volunteers when you start your task.